Hello, Dark Reader, and welcome to the Dark Side of the Library podcast. I'm your host, Katie. Today on this minisode, we are going to be talking about The Last Word. This is by Taylor Adams. So originally, we went through a bunch of curated books a bit ago, and I remember this one in particular for a couple reasons. One, the setting is in Washington, dark and dreary, where I live. So I was like, well, I gotta read that. But not only that, this book, I will talk about the summary first, is about a girl isolated in Washington. She leaves this 1-star review from, about this horrible psychological thriller. She ends up having an online argument with the actual author, and they're like, take it down. And she's like, nah, I'm not going to do that. And then it ends up becoming, it escalates. So things start happening around her house, some weird stuff, and she starts to suspect, is this person stalking her? And she dives deeper into the author's life, and there's a lot of these weird coincidences and commonalities in his books. They're all very sadistic, they're tales of murder, and they're all kind of unrealistic, but they're also there's certain details are just glaring, and it bothers her. And so she's worried that she might have a creepy stalker author on her hands, and maybe he's way more dangerous than she suspects. So I watch a lot of other reviewers. I clearly do some of that myself. And one person that I do watch is Rachel, Reads from Rachel. And something she's mentioned is authors behaving badly. And there's plenty. This book is actually kind of grounded in realism, except for obviously the killing, although I don't know. Maybe they've never been caught. But anyway, there are some authors out there that have definitely gotten in those heated debates with their readers before, and they were take those bad reviews down, and they get armies of people who support their work to attack people. And these things are real, they do happen. There's some really horrible authors out there, and lots of reviewers are almost at risk sometimes of reviewing a book. So I was really fascinated with it because it was grounded in a place where hey, you know what, this could actually happen. And not only that, I had a friend who messaged me and was like, holy cow, 5 out of 5. This was a crazy book. Super thrilling. She had goosebumps, and she was just wow, I've never been terrified so much. And she was raving about it. She loved the book. So of course that raised the bar. I was like, okay, fine, I gotta read this. So I raised it on my TBR and I gave it a go. So just to let you know, I actually give this book about a 3 out of 5. And something that I wanted to touch on too is that the craft, I do my own craft. I'm an artist, and I understand the fear of the criticism of the world, and it's hard to read that kind of stuff and whatnot. But it's interesting because things hit people differently, very differently. And an example of that is actually this book. So my friend thought that this was a suspenseful thriller horror novel, and I actually felt like this was more a satire kind of thriller, more tongue-in-cheek. So we'll get into that a little bit. Let me tell you about Taylor Adams first. So Taylor Adams actually did grow up in Washington, and he went to school in Eastern Washington University, and I think he might have gotten a degree in playwriting or something. He's been doing a lot of writing. Some of his notable works are No Exit and also Hairpin Bridge. So No Exit actually is a really lots of people have loved that book. So give that one a go, especially if you do enjoy this book. So let me talk to you about this novel real fast. I'll explain why I felt like this was more of a satire versus a thriller. I think this book will be a little divisive, but this one is interesting because I've never actually approached a novel and had 2 different genres, I guess, appear before my very eyes, where my friends are like, oh, this is a romance, and I'm like, no, this is a fantasy. So this was kind of our first time where I'm like, I don't really know if this is actually really truly a thriller. I guess we'll never know unless if you're Taylor Adams, and then he'll let us know which way it actually is. Let me begin by saying our main protagonist, Emma Carpenter, is living in a rental house in like just some isolated area in Washington. Like there's the ocean there. She goes with her dog, Laika, who's a golden retriever, super precious. She has a neighbor that she kind of communicates with, like the only person around. And the only communication they actually do is kind of like through the windows. I know that sounds weird, but it's kind of endearing at the same time. They'll play hangman together and write each other little notes. But she hasn't really kind of met up with him. So she moved there purposefully to kind of get away from it all. She's running away from some of her own personal problems. So she decided to go there. She does keep in contact with the actual owner of the house, whose name is Jules, and they'll just kind of text sometimes, but those are the only two people she really talks to, plus obviously her dog. Laika's so cute. So she does do this review, and she gets in this fight with the author, H.G. Cain. Weird things have been going on in the house already. Like, she kind of thinks it's cute and haunted a little bit. It seems like the toilet flushes itself sometimes, you know, that kind of thing. And she never really goes and investigates. She doesn't, I don't know, she's just tired. She's like, I don't care. It is what it is. She's clearly going through a lot of stuff right now, and she is very depressed, our main character. She's almost actually, it's like if one extra thing goes wrong, she might make some really horrible decisions. That's the kind of character whose view we have. We also have the other view of H.G. Cain as we progress through the story, and he is kind of a little narcissistic. He's kind of gross too in a lot of ways. He actually reminds me of like neckbeard guys. That's what he smells like, butter and Mountain Dew. What a horrible combination. So we have these two characters, very different people and different perspectives throughout the book. Most of the characters in this story, like even Deke, the neighbor, Jules, some of the other, like the officers even, the reason why I really felt like this was kind of more satirical and lost some of that earthiness, the grounded portion that I liked that made it a thriller, everything was a big trope. I mean, the officers acted exactly the way they do in all slasher movies. I mean, especially classic 90s slasher movies. We have our final girl syndrome in Emma, our creepy stalker guy. Yeah, just so over the top and ridiculous. Even our twists, turns, our revelations, all of those things, very much a slasher film. But like to the most comedic extent. Not quite scary movie comedy. It's drier and more palatable, but also so ridiculous at the same time. The characters are almost making fun of themselves because the book feels very meta. So let me get into that a little bit. The whole premise of this story is that Emma Carpenter writes a negative review, and the author gets so pissed and might actually create a new novel based on his encounter with Emma. So that's not really a spoiler. So it even goes through why Emma believes that H.G. Cain's book, Murder Mountain, is so horrible. The girls would never wear high-heeled shoes while hiking. The girls would never do this. Why didn't she use the gun when she had the gun in her hands? Why did the killer do this? So Emma nitpicks the crap out of this book and why it makes no sense and how silly it is. And yet this book kind of does the same thing. Like, why is Emma doing this when she's speaking to the police? Why did Emma go over here and not over there? So there's a lot of things that is really just meta in the book, and even Emma will say stuff like, oh, why did I do that? And I'm like, why didn't you do that, Mrs. I would be smarter than the final girl in H.G. Cain's books? So that's why I almost feel like this was meant to be a little tongue-in-cheek, because it calls itself out all the time. Not only that, it's just there's too many revelations, too many twists and turns to the point where it's so silly. You can't take it seriously. I would feel like it was crying wolf over and over and over and over again. It's too much, and it was so ludicrous a lot of the time. And not only are the revelations over the top and the characters are over the top, there's a few things that in general are a little nutty. So like, even for instance, a weapon that they use is a katana. Even just some of the items that were used or is focused on, or defenses or whatever, seems so hysterical. It's just not a very good weapon. Who has these things? It's just a very weird thing to do. So there was just a few things where I was like, this is a little comical. It was hard for me to take it seriously. But alternatively, so in the very beginning, I do give it that it was a lot more thrilling. I started to feel that horror vibe, but because it did go on too long and it was just endless, it just got silly. The pacing of the book was actually fairly well done. In the very beginning, like I said, it was a little scary. It was starting to have some buildup. A lot of the book is just action-packed. It is a page-turner. I would say it actually, oddly, slowed down at probably the last 20%, which is where a whole bunch of different revelations are revealed. I mean, just page after page after page of, oh, what? Oh, no. And that was the slowest part of this book, which was strange, but that's how it was for me. So I do think if this was actually supposed to be a thriller novel, cutting down this book into a short story would have been an excellent thriller. Granted, it probably would have been very similar to like Scream, because Emma is pretty similar with like Sydney. Sometimes they have moments of badassery, but a lot of the times it's just dumb luck and silly bad, serial killer ghost face, like tripping over something stupid. The very beginning though, I was so invested in the characters. I was really anticipating what was happening next. So the pacing is great, I would say, throughout the entire novel. And finally, because this is a mini-sode, our dog. So just an FYI, this book, even though I personally think this is a satire, I think it was kind of hysterical, there are a lot of things in here that are very gory. There's a lot of atmospheric horror for sure. It does deal with things like suicide, depression, and violence, especially. We are talking about a slasher film, so you'll see a lot of gore, but also animal violence too. And those were actually the parts for me that really made me the most uncomfortable and scared. So great. I mean, Taylor Adams did a great job with that. And those parts for me dealing with Laika were very, very spooky. But I guess, spoiler, the dog ends up being okay. But even though I'm giving you that, just the whole process was still horrendous. Like, that was the worst part and the scariest part for me in the book. Laika's just a precious little pupper, and I just want Laika to be forever just alive in this novel, just forever okay. So overall, I would give this book, even though, so if I were viewing this as just a thriller novel, this would probably be for me like a 2. But because I think this is more like a satire, I genuinely actually feel like it, because it's so meta. It is over the top, so ridiculous a lot of the time. Even my friend who I told, I was like, I don't think this book was necessarily for me, I didn't get that same reaction. They even said, yeah, I love how over the top everything was. I did not even ask for it. So they admitted that they were like, yeah, okay, this, there is a lot going on in this book. Like, it is like a little nutty. So I'm viewing this more in that this book was fun, hilarious. This is about a 3 out of 5. It was entertaining. It was very entertaining in general. It's a good read if you are going on summer vacation, if you are trying to find some solo time. This might be a great read. Just like if you are alone in a house, it'd probably be extra spooky because you're like, oh my, and don't go reviewing items on Amazon if you are alone, you're isolated, and nobody knows where you are, and you only speak to 2 people that you barely even know. So check out The Last Word by Taylor Adams. It was an interesting read. I had no problems getting through it. It wasn't flowery. It was very just super simple, super fun, and kind of hysterical. If you are looking for some other reads, though, make sure to join us over on our YouTube podcast and our other socials, Instagram, Facebook, at Dark Side of the Library. You can find our show notes as well at darksideofthelibrary.com. And as Halloween is approaching, you'll be able to find us going live on amazon.com/live/darksideofthelibrary. We'll have a lot of cool Halloween items up on there. And I'm probably going to check out the next Taylor Adams book, the No Exit book, and see how that goes for me. It is rated higher on Goodreads, so I imagine it's got to be pretty solid, I would hope. And I think it's actually supposed to be a thriller. I don't know. We'll see. Thanks again for watching / listening. Make sure to give us a like, follow, subscribe, and let us know what kind of books you guys are into and what you want me to read next time.